terms like it's not a tense, it's a mood. And they apply a bunch of rules to it that, in reality, just don't work. Because if you follow and apply those rules, they'll more often than not let you down. Instead, the fastest way to start using the subjunctive correctly in your Spanish is to simply focus on the words that actually trigger it. And we'll call these trigger words. Now, once you hit a trigger word in a sentence, it's like you trip a wire or you step on a landmine because there's nowhere else to go but into the subjunctive. Then, once you use the subjunctive, everything gets reset back to normal again. Now, as we go through the module, you'll see more and more what I mean, but I'd like you to keep in mind this analogy because it really will help you. Let's get going with part 1. What I'm about to show you here is very important, so I want you to pay close attention. Look at this sentence. I want to wait here. Nice and simple. How would you translate that into Spanish? It would be quiero esperar aquí. Now, things get a lot more tricky and complicated if we want to change that to I want him to wait here. So we've gone from I want to wait here to I want him to wait here. At this point, we run into a problem. The problem is you can't do a direct, literal translation of that into Spanish and say something like lo quiero, meaning I want him to wait here, esperar aquí. That doesn't exist in Spanish and would sound horrible to their ears. So instead, what we have to do is rephrase it. Instead of being I want him to wait here, it would be I want that he waits here. Now, this is something that happens everywhere in Spanish. For example, let's take I want you to decide. How would you rephrase that in English so that we could put in the word that? It would be I want that you decide. This is what you would do in Spanish. This is the translation that you would follow if you wanted to express this in English. I want you to decide. You would have to rephrase it in Spanish and say, I want that you decide. Let's try some more. How would you rephrase this one? I want you to speak with me. So rephrase it using the word that. It becomes, I want that you speak with me. I want you to eat. How would you rephrase it? I want that you eat. I want him to stay. Rephrase that one. I want that he stays. I want her to marry me. I want that she marries me. I want you to show me. I want that you show me. I want us to trust each other. I want that we trust each other. I want them to come here. I want that they come here. So, to summarize, let's take this one. I want to come here. There's no problem here. We're simply saying, quiero venir aquí. The problem happens when we have to throw in, I want him to come here. I want her to come here. I want you to come here. I want us to come here again next year on holiday. I want them to come here. When it's just, I want to come here, and there's no other person or thing included here, it's simple. Quiero venir aquí. It's when we throw in him, her, them, us, you, that we're forced to rephrase it. So, for example, I want you to come here. We have to now rephrase that so that we use the word that. So it becomes, I want that you come here. This is now translatable into Spanish. I want that you come here. I want that he comes here, or she comes here. I want that we come here again next year. I want that they come here. This is what you have to do in Spanish. You have to rephrase it. So if you need to watch this video a few more times to get the hang of it, please do that, because this is very, very important knowledge when it comes to using the subjunctive correctly in Spanish. Welcome to part 2. In the last video, we saw how certain types of sentences had to be rephrased in order to get something that was translatable into Spanish, something that would work. Because we have this sentence of, I want him to wait here. But if we tried to say, lo quiero for this and esperar aquí, it didn't exist in Spanish. So we had to rephrase it into, I want that he waits here. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because this section here, I want that, would be quiero que. And quiero que is a trigger for the subjunctive. After you say quiero que, there's nowhere else to go. You've tripped the subjunctive wire, and the next verb must be in the subjunctive. Here we have that sentence. I want that is the trigger. And the next verb is he waits. So we're working with the verb esperar. Now, what is he waits in the subjunctive? We have to switch it over to the other side. So he waits would become espere. Now, going back to our sentence, I want that he waits here, becomes in Spanish now, quiero que espere aquí. Here you can see our trigger with quiero que. Then we have the next verb in the subjunctive, going to espere, finishing off with aquí. Quiero que espere aquí. Let's follow that sequence one more time. The original sentence was, I want him to wait here. But that not being translatable literally into Spanish, we had to reorganize it, rephrase it into, I want that he waits here. Now, I want that is quiero que, and that is a trigger for the subjunctive. So we had quiero que espere aquí. You can see the verb esperar now being represented in the subjunctive. Now, what's interesting about this is that the subjunctive was forced, because I want him to wait here. There's no way to say that without using the subjunctive. We're forced into saying, I want that he waits here. And as soon as you express that, I want that he does whatever it is, it's a trigger. You've triggered the subjunctive now. So very often what this means is that the only way to express some things in Spanish is to use the subjunctive. There's no way around it, because there's no other way of saying it. In the upcoming lessons now, we'll do many more examples of this. What I'd like to do in part 3 is run you through some more sequences. The advantage of this is you'll start to get acclimatized to using the subjunctive. In other words, you'll start to get an idea of what it feels like to use it. Let's begin with this first one. It says, I want you to decide today. Now, how would we rephrase that sentence in English using the word that? It would be, I want that you decide today. What's the verb to decide? Decidir. And what is you decide in the subjunctive? Decidas. Now, how would you say, I want you to decide today? Quiero que decidas hoy. I want you to eat now. Rephrase this one using the word that. I want that you eat now. What's the verb to eat? Comer. And what is you eat in the subjunctive? Comas. Now say, I want you to eat now. Quiero que comas ahora. I want you to speak with him later. Rephrase this one in English. I want that you speak with him later. What's the verb to speak? Hablar. And what is you speak in the subjunctive? Hables. Now say, I want you to speak with him later. Quiero que hables con él más tarde. I want you to work tomorrow. Rephrase this one in English. I want that you work tomorrow. What's the verb to work? Trabajar. And what is you work in the subjunctive? Trabajes. Now, how would you say, I want you to work tomorrow? Quiero que trabajes mañana. I want you to sell the house. Rephrase this one. I want that you sell the house. What's the verb to sell? Vender. And what is you sell in the subjunctive? Vendas. Now say, I want you to sell the house. Quiero que vendas la casa. I want you to learn Spanish. Rephrase this. I want that you learn Spanish. What's the verb to learn? Aprender. What is you learn in the subjunctive? Aprendas. Now say, I want you to learn Spanish. Quiero que aprendas español. How would you rephrase this? I want you to write a letter. I want that you write a letter. What's the verb to write? Escribir. And what is you write in the subjunctive? Escribas. Now say, I want you to write a letter. The word for a letter is una carta. Quiero que escribas una carta. How would you rephrase, I want you to climb the ladder? I want that you climb the ladder. What's the verb to climb? Subir. And what is you climb in the subjunctive? Subas. Now say, I want you to climb the ladder. The word for the ladder is la escalera. Quiero que subas la escalera. I want you to live here with me. How would you rephrase that? I want that you live here with me. What's the verb to live? Vivir. And what is you live in the subjunctive? Vivas. Now say, I want you to live here with me. Quiero que vivas aquí conmigo. I want you to break the glass. Rephrase this. I want that you break the glass. What's the verb to break? Romper. What is you break in the subjunctive? Rompas. Now say, I want you to break the glass. The word for the glass is el cristal. Quiero que rompas el cristal. I want you to take the book. Rephrase this one. I want that you take the book. What's the verb to take? Tomar. What is you take in the subjunctive? Tomes. Now say, I want you to take the book, please. Quiero que tomes el libro, por favor. Welcome to part 4. So here we have our first trigger for the subjunctive, quiero que. However, there are many others. For example, I hope you speak with him tomorrow. In English, it's also correct to say, I hope that you speak with him tomorrow. Both ways are possible and correct in English. Now, in Spanish, there's only one way. You will always say, I hope that, which gives us espero que. And guess what? This is a trigger for the subjunctive. So let's dive into it. How would you say, I hope that you speak with him tomorrow? Pause and think it out. Remember that you must use the subjunctive here because it's been triggered by espero que. Espero que hables con él mañana. I hope that you learn Spanish. How would you say that? Espero que aprendas español. I hope you receive the parcel tomorrow. The word for the parcel is el paquete. Espero que recibas el paquete mañana. I hope that you sell everything soon. Espero que vendas todo pronto. I hope that you decide soon. Espero que decidas pronto. So now we have two triggers for the subjunctive. We have quiero que and espero que. Here's another one for you. Necesito que. For example, I need you to wait here. How would you rephrase this in English so that we could include the word that? I need that you wait here. This is what you will do in Spanish. How would you say that? Necesito que esperes aquí. I need you to work all day tomorrow. Rephrase this one in English. I need that you work all day tomorrow. How would you say that in Spanish? Necesito que trabajes todo el día mañana. I need you to call Juan Pablo. Rephrase this one. I need that you call Juan Pablo. How would you say that? Necesito que llames a Juan Pablo. Hopefully you didn't forget the personal a here. I need you to decide what you want to do tomorrow. Rephrase this one. I need that you decide what you want to do tomorrow. How would you say that in Spanish? Necesito que decidas lo que quieres hacer mañana. Our list now has grown to 3 triggers. We have quiero que, espero que, and necesito que. As you can see, all 3 triggers work with the same set of mechanics underneath them. Again, quiero que, espero que, necesito que, they're all tripwires. they all trigger the subjunctive in the next verb that follows. Welcome to part 5. In the last video, I was more or less asking you to form the subjunctive on your own. For example, we take a sentence like, I need you to decide what you want to do tomorrow, and I was leaving it up to you to figure out how you were going to handle this verb in the subjunctive. Now, this probably slowed many of you down and you had to pause and think it out a lot, and that's all completely normal. At this point in time, I don't mind how slow you are, I only care that you're getting it right. Now, if you are getting it wrong, meaning that you're unable to form the subjunctive correctly, you need to go back and revise Module 1 a few more times before going any further into this module. Because the worst thing that you can do is rush into using the subjunctive before you're comfortable with actually forming it. So you need to make that decision now. Are you going to keep going forward, or do you need to go back and practice more forming the subjunctive? Now, assuming that you're doing okay and you are forming the subjunctive correctly so far, then you've got the green light from me to keep going. Because in the upcoming videos, we're going to dig a lot deeper into the subjunctive. All right, welcome to part 6. So far, we've only been working with one angle. That's the angle of I. So we have I want that, I need that, and I hope that. But the subjunctive also applies to all the other angles as well. For example, we have our sentence here of I want him to wait here. But this could equally be you want him to wait here. Or he wants him to wait here. She wants him to wait here. Change this to we want him to wait here, or they want him to wait here. What this means is that the subjunctive is not just about quiero que, but also it will be triggered by every other angle as well. Quieres que, quiere que, queremos que, and quieren que. So let's work through this. Here we have a sentence that we're well used to at this stage. I want him to wait here. So how would you translate that into Spanish? Quiero que espere aquí. Now moving along to the next angle, we have you want him to wait here. First of all, how would you rephrase this in English using the word that? You want that he waits here. So to translate this, you want would be quieres, and you want that, quieres que. Here we have a trigger for the subjunctive. So we have espere in the subjunctive. Quieres que espere aquí. You want that he waits here. The mechanics work in exactly the same way. Nothing has changed, only the angle. Instead of quiero que, we're now using quieres que, but all the rest remains stationary. Something interesting is that we could also ask this as a question instead of a statement. So it would be, do you want that he waits here? How would you say that? ¿Quieres que espere aquí? Just as before in all of Spanish, whenever you ask a question, you just use the intonation of your voice, and this is no different for the subjunctive either. So as a statement, you have ¿Quieres que espere aquí? You want that he waits here. But as a question, do you want that he waits here? ¿Quieres que espere aquí? Try to work out this next one on your own. We have she wants him to wait here. So first of all, how would we rephrase that in English? It would be, she wants that he waits here. Now, translate that into Spanish. Quiere que espere aquí. Here we have, she wants that. Quiere que, he waits, espere, and here, aquí. What about, we want him to wait here? How would you rephrase that in English? We want that he waits here. Now translate it into Spanish. Queremos que espere aquí. Here you have your trigger, queremos que, so the next verb is in the subjunctive. What about they want him to wait here? How would you rephrase it in English? They want that he waits here. Now translate it into Spanish. Quieren que espere aquí. Now, as you can see, the topic of the subjunctive just got a whole lot bigger in Spanish. But I don't want you to be put off by this or intimidated or scared by it, because the important thing to remember is that the mechanics are exactly the same no matter what angle you use. All that's happened is that instead of having quiero que for I want him to do whatever, it also applies to the other angles. So we have quiero que, quieres que, quiere que, queremos que, quieren que. All the angles will trigger the subjunctive in the exact same way as quiero que, the one that we've already been working with and using a lot. Next up, we're going to run a drill, and this is really going to show you if you're understanding the subjunctive so far. So let's see how you do with it. Welcome to part 7. I'm going to be completely honest with you here and tell you that I'm more or less going to throw you into the subjunctive washing machine. We're going to drill 20 questions, and it's normal to be very slow at first. It'll feel like hard work, but I promise that it will get easier over time. As always, the thing is to go slow, pause, and really think out your answers properly. Be careful with what you decide. We're going to continue using the 3 triggers of to want, hope, and need. So let's see how you go. I want you to work tomorrow. How would you say that in Spanish? Quiero que trabajes mañana. Do you want me to wait here? ¿Quieres que espere aquí? He wants us to speak with him later. Quiere que hablemos con él más tarde. She wants them to learn Spanish. Quiere que aprendan español. We want him to eat his food. Queremos que coma su comida. They want her to decide before tomorrow. Quieren que decida antes de mañana. I hope you learn quickly. Espero que aprendas rápido. He hopes we sell the house soon. Espera que vendamos la casa pronto. She hopes they call tomorrow. Espera que llamen mañana. We hope he writes a letter to his mom. Esperamos que escriba una carta a su mamá. They hope she receives the parcel. Esperan que reciba el paquete. I need you to write a letter for me. Necesito que escribas una carta por mí. Here I'm using por because this is a substitution. Instead of me writing the letter, you're going to write it. Do you need me to wait here? ¿Necesitas que espere aquí? He needs us to go up the ladder. Necesita que subamos la escalera. She needs them to decide. Necesita que decidan. We need him to break the glass. Necesitamos que rompa el cristal. They need her to call the office. Necesitan que llame a la oficina. Do you want us to buy the book? ¿Quieres que compremos el libro? I need them to work all day tomorrow. Necesito que trabajen todo el día mañana. They hope we sell everything today. Esperan que vendamos todo hoy. Something unusual that one or two of you may have picked up on in this video is that the verb esperar has a double meaning. It can mean to hope, because espero que whatever, I hope that. But it can also mean to wait. Necesito esperar aquí. So, just in case that was throwing you off or confusing you in any way, I just want to make sure that you realize esperar has a double meaning, to hope or to wait. In part 8, I'd like to draw your attention to a small point, but an important point. If we look at this example of hable, meaning I speak, he speaks, she speaks, and it speaks in the subjunctive. So we have all four angles in the subjunctive represented with hable. Now, in the course of conversation, there may be times when it's not exactly clear which angle you're referring to, I, he, she, or it. And if that happens, there is a way that you can make it explicitly clear which angle you're referring to. So here's how you do that. Say we have, I want him to speak, and it's not clear, this part here, that you're referring to him. So normally we would have quiero que hable, because hable stands for he speaks, along with all the others. So what you would do is just put in the clarifier of él in front of the subjunctive here. So quiero que él hable would be making it explicitly clear that you want him to speak. Equally, if we had I want her to speak, again, in normal conversation when it's already understood in the context, you would simply say quiero que hable. However, if it wasn't clear, then you would throw in ella. Again, in front of the subjunctive, the exact same position. So we have quiero que ella hable. Now, in the last case, we have they want me to speak. We can't say I want me to speak, right? So we had to change the angle to they to give us an example we could work with. So again, you might say quieren que hable. They want that I speak. But if it wasn't clear, or if you wanted to emphasize it, this is where you throw in the yo pronoun. So we have quieren que yo hable. It's important to remember that you still only use these pronouns of yo, él, and ella in this way when it's absolutely necessary. If it's already clear who you're referring to, you leave them out, because it's what native speakers do, and as a general rule, we should always try to copy them. Welcome to part 9. What we're going to do now is talk about negative statements in the subjunctive. For example, I don't want him to wait here, or I don't need him to work today. Now, negative statements like these examples will also trigger the subjunctive, but fortunately, it's a relatively easy thing to do. Let's look at this example. I don't want him to wait here. Now, how would you rephrase that in English, just as before, using the word that? It becomes, I don't want that he waits here. So our trigger here, I don't want that, this part here, is going to be no quiero que. So instead of quiero que being the trigger, in the negative we have no, meaning I don't want that he waits here. So in our example it becomes no quiero que espere aquí. Here we have our trigger in the subjunctive, just we've flipped the coin onto the other side so that now it's a negative statement. No quiero que, then we have esperar, right, in the subjunctive. Espere, for he waits, and then aquí. No quiero que espere aquí. Following on from the last video, I wonder if you could make that same statement explicit. So how would you say, I don't want that he waits here, but make the he part explicit? No quiero que él espere aquí. Here's another example. I don't want him to speak with you. How would you rephrase that in English? I don't want that he speaks with you. Now try to translate that into Spanish. No quiero que hable contigo. I don't want him to eat with us. How would you rephrase that one? I don't want that he eats with us. Now translate it into Spanish. No quiero que coma con nosotros. Let's repeat that same sentence, but instead of him, we're going to say her, and we want to make the her explicit. So I don't want her to eat with us. It would be no quiero que ella coma con nosotros. So here with our clarifier, we're making it very explicit that we are referring to her. I don't want him to call. How would you rephrase that? I don't want that he calls. Now translate it. No quiero que llame. Let's make that one explicit for her now. How would you translate it? No quiero que ella llame. Now something else to be aware of is with the following example. We have I hope he calls. So this is something we're used to. It's not negative. I hope he calls. So we have espero que llame. Now here's the thing to watch out for. You wouldn't say I don't hope he calls, right? That would sound wrong in English. Instead, what you would say is I hope he doesn't call. Now what this means is that the position of the no is going to change in Spanish. What we're essentially saying is, I hope that he doesn't call, which would be espero que no llame. You see how, unlike the other two examples, the no is not appearing at the front of the sentence? Because we're saying he doesn't here in the middle. We're still saying, I hope that. I hope that he doesn't call. So it would be espero que no llame. How would you say, I hope that he doesn't call today? Espero que no llame hoy. I hope he doesn't sell the house. Espero que no venda la casa. I hope he doesn't decide too quickly. Espero que no decida tan rápido. I hope he doesn't live here. Espero que no viva aquí. I hope that he doesn't speak with me. Espero que no hable conmigo. So, in summary, we have I don't want him to call, which is no quiero que llame. Notice that we have I don't want as the negative up front, so we have the no up front. No quiero, I don't want. Equally, I don't need him to call would be no necesito que llame. Again, I don't need becomes no necesito with the no at the front. But in English, you can't really say, I don't hope he calls. Instead, we say, I hope he doesn't call. And now the negative part has changed its position. So this is why we get espero que no llame. We still have I hope that. As you can see in the English here, I hope that. And then the negative is in the middle, que no llame. So just watch out for that with some triggers in the subjunctive. Welcome to part 10 of our second module on the subjunctive. So far, we've been working with pronouns of him, her, you, them, and so forth. In other words, I want him to speak. I want her to wait. I want them to call. But it's also possible to use the subjunctive with specific people or groups. So, for example, my daughter in Spanish is mi hija. Mi hija. Now, if we wanted to say, I want my daughter to learn Spanish, this is also going to trigger the subjunctive. So, how would you rephrase that using the word that? It becomes, I want that my daughter learn Spanish. Now, to say that would be, quiero que mi hija aprenda español. Here we have our trigger, but instead of him or her or them, now we're mentioning a specific person, my daughter. So it works in exactly the same way, regardless of if you're saying him, her, or them, or someone specific like my daughter. So we have, once again, quiero que mi hija aprenda español. My son in Spanish is mi hijo. Mi hijo. So we have hija for daughter, but hijo for son. Look at this sentence. I want my son to wait here. First, how would you rephrase that? I want that my son waits here. Now, translate it into Spanish. Quiero que mi hijo espere aquí. To express my friend, you have options. You can say mi amigo if it's male, a male friend, or mi amiga if it's a female friend. Let's suppose in this next sentence that we're referring to a female friend. And what we want to say is, I hope my friend calls. How would you translate that into Spanish? Espero que mi amiga llame. Here again, you can see a specific person, but the subjunctive and the structure of the sentence works in exactly the same way as our previous examples. What about this one? I hope my friend receives the parcel. Here, our friend is male, so try to translate this one into Spanish. Espero que mi amigo reciba el paquete. To say my uncle is mi tío. Mi tío. How would you translate, I need my uncle to decide today? First of all, rephrase that in English. It becomes, I need that my uncle decides today. Now translate it into Spanish. Necesito que mi tío decida hoy. What about, I want my mother to live here? Rephrase this one. I want that my mother lives here. Now say it in Spanish. Quiero que mi mamá viva aquí. You could also say mi madre. Either way, quiero que mi madre viva aquí. What about I don't want my mother to live here with me? How would you rephrase it? I don't want that my mother lives here with me. Now translate it. No quiero que mi mamá viva aquí conmigo. So far in this video, we've been using single people, my daughter, my son, my mother, my uncle, and so forth. But we can also use plurals. For example, my children. My children in Spanish is mis niños. Mis niños. Look at this one. I want my children to learn Spanish. First of all, rephrase that. I want that my children learn Spanish. Now, how would you say it in Spanish? Quiero que mis niños aprendan español. My friends in Spanish would be mis amigos. Mis amigos. And our sentence is, I need my friends to wait. So rephrase that first. I need that my friends wait. Now, how would you translate it? Necesito que mis amigos esperen. Let's flip the coin. I don't want my friends to wait. How would you translate that? No quiero que mis amigos esperen. My parents in Spanish is mis padres. You could also say mis papás, but mis padres works just as well. How would you translate, I hope my parents sell the house? Espero que mis padres vendan la casa. Because I don't want my parents to live there. Porque no quiero que mis padres vivan allí. So, in summary, so far in our structure, our sentence structure with the subjunctive, we've been concentrating mostly on using you, him, her, them, and so forth. But as you've seen in this video, you can also use it with specific people, like daughter, son, friend, mother, uncle, aunt, and also plurals, such as children, friends, parents. The thing to hold on to is that the structure does not change. You're simply replacing these pronouns with specific people or specific groups. Everything else remains the same. Welcome to part 11. Many of you may be asking a rather obvious question at this point in the module, which is just how many triggers are there? Well, the answer is there's hundreds of triggers. However, not even native speakers use all of them, and so you probably won't either. The secret is to focus on the most important ones. In other words, the ones you'll actually use. So far we have quiero que, necesito que, and espero que. Now these are all very common triggers that you will almost certainly use in the course of everyday conversation. The problem is that too many people try to memorize a huge list of every possible trigger in the subjunctive, and they almost always get overwhelmed and drown. A much better way is to focus only on what you'll use. So, to add to our list of 3, I'm going to give you a couple more very important triggers now. Saying I like that or I would like that often triggers the subjunctive. So we get me gusta que or me gustaría que. For example, I like that the teacher talks with me. The word for the teacher is la maestra. La maestra. Now, I wonder if you could translate this into Spanish. Have a go. Me gusta que la maestra hable conmigo. Here we have our trigger, me gusta que, followed by a specific person, the teacher, la maestra. This triggers the subjunctive, so we get hable, and finally conmigo. Me gusta que la maestra hable conmigo. What about this one? I like that my children eat very well every day. How would you translate that? Me gusta que mis niños coman muy bien todos los días. Here we have a trigger, me gusta que, and here we have the verb in the subjunctive, coman. Here's another trigger for you. I prefer that. This would be prefiero que. Prefiero que. Look at this example. I prefer that he waits here. How would you say that in Spanish, knowing that I prefer that is a trigger? It would be prefiero que espere aquí. Here is our trigger in the subjunctive, prefiero que. What about I prefer that she waits here and make she explicit? Prefiero que ella espere aquí. I prefer that they wait here. How would you translate that? Prefiero que esperen aquí. I prefer that you call after 8. To express after 8 would be después de las 8. Try to translate that now. Prefiero que llames después de las 8. I prefer that my daughter learns Spanish instead of French. To express instead of French would be en lugar de francés. Prefiero que mi hija aprenda español en lugar de francés. Here again we have trigger with the verb in the subjunctive. What this means is that so far we have 5 triggers to work with, and these are triggers that we're going to use a lot. So we're not wasting our time worrying about unnecessary stuff that's only going to overwhelm us or slow us down. We have quiero que, necesito que, espero que, me gusta que, and prefiero que. Now, of course, as I've told you, there are plenty more, but you'll only get overwhelmed by worrying about them. So let's grab this handful of important triggers first and keep moving forward. In part 12, I'd like to run you through another drill. Now we're going to hold on and continue to use the collection of 5 triggers that we have so far, but all the verbs are going to be new or relatively new. So as always, I'd like you to think it out, take your time, and pause whenever you need to. The verb to take out is sacar. Sacar. How would you say, I need you to take out the trash, please? The word for the trash or the garbage is la basura. Necesito que saques la basura, por favor. The verb to swim is nadar. How would you say, I don't want my daughter to swim in the pool? Before, we had la alberca, but you can also say la piscina for the pool. So let's switch to this other word now. No quiero que mi hija nade en la piscina. I prefer my son to swim in the pool instead of the sea. Prefiero que mi hijo nade en la piscina en lugar del mar. The verb to buy is comprar. How would you say, I hope they buy a present for me? Espero que compren un regalo para mí. The verb to cook in Spanish is cocinar. How would you say, I like that you cook for your family? Me gusta que cocines para tu familia. The verb to smoke is fumar. How would you say, I like that they don't smoke? Me gusta que no fumen. What about, I prefer that they don't smoke in my car? Prefiero que no fumen en mi carro. The verb to ignore is ignorar. How would you say, I don't want us to ignore the truth? No quiero que ignoremos la verdad. The verb to wash is lavar. How would you say, I don't need them to wash my clothes. I can do it myself. The word for my clothes is mi ropa. No necesito que laven mi ropa. Puedo hacerlo yo mismo or yo misma. The verb to shout is gritar. How would you say, I hope you don't shout like that all the time? Espero que no grites así todo el tiempo. Let's switch to other angles now. Once again, we had the verb to take out, which is sacar. How would you ask, do you need me to take out the trash? ¿Necesitas que saque la basura? I prefer that you take the garbage out tonight instead of tomorrow morning. Prefiero que saques la basura esta noche en lugar de mañana en la mañana. The verb to swim is nadar. How would you say, they don't want your dog to swim in the pool? No quieren que tu perro nade en la piscina. The verb to buy is comprar. How would you ask, do you want me to buy a present for you? ¿Quieres que compre un regalo para ti? The verb to cook is cocinar. How would you ask, do you prefer that I cook tonight? ¿Prefieres que cocine esta noche? The verb to smoke is fumar. How would you say, he prefers that you don't smoke here? Prefiere que no fumes aquí. To ignore is ignorar. They want me to ignore the truth. Quieren que ignore la verdad. To wash is lavar. How would you say, she doesn't need me to wash her clothes. She can do it herself. No necesita que lave su ropa. Puede hacerlo ella misma. The verb to shout is gritar. How would you say, we hope they don't shout like that all the time? Esperamos que no griten así todo el tiempo. In part 13, I'd like to talk about these little pronouns me, te, le, lo, and there's a whole bunch of them that we've been using throughout the course so far. Now the question is, how do these pronouns behave or change when we're working inside the world of the subjunctive? Well, the good news is that they work exactly the same as to what we're already used to. This means they maintain the same positions in sentences. In other words, the structure is the same. The only thing that is different is that verbs will now be in the subjunctive. So let's do a few examples so that you can see for yourself that there's really nothing to be worried about. Let's begin with something that we're already very used to, the verb comprar and the pronoun lo. Our sentence is, he wants me to buy it. How would you rephrase that using the word that? It becomes, he wants that I buy it. Now in Spanish, this would be, quiere que lo compre. Here we have our trigger, quiere que, and then compre is I buy in the subjunctive, and you can see the lo in its regular position. Because this verb is conjugated, then the pronoun comes up here instead of being hooked onto the end of the full verb. So it's exactly the same structure. It's just that now the verb itself is in the subjunctive. Try this next one. He wants me to buy it for him tomorrow. Quiere que lo compre para él mañana. She needs me to buy it for her today. Necesita que lo compre para ella hoy. She doesn't want me to buy it because it's too expensive and we don't need it. No quiere que lo compre porque es demasiado caro y no lo necesitamos. They want me to buy it. Quieren que lo compre. They don't want me to buy it. No quieren que lo compre. They don't want me to buy it yet. Todavía no quieren que lo compre. We'll stick with the pronoun of lo, but we'll change our verb to vender, which means to sell. How would you say, she wants me to sell it? Quiere que lo venda. She wants me to sell it today. Quiere que lo venda hoy. She needs me to sell it before the weekend. Before the weekend would be antes del fin de semana. Necesita que lo venda antes del fin de semana. The next verb will be ignorar, to ignore, and the pronoun will be te. Our sentence is, he wants me to ignore you. First, how would you rephrase that in English? He wants that I ignore you. Now translate it into Spanish. Quiere que te ignore. She wants me to ignore you because you didn't speak with her yesterday. Quiere que te ignore porque no hablaste con ella ayer. We'll switch verbs now to llamar, and the pronoun will be me. The sentence is, I want him to call me. How would you rephrase that in English? I want that he calls me. Now translate it. Quiero que me llame. I hope he calls me soon. Espero que me llame pronto. I hope he calls me soon because it's important. Espero que me llame pronto porque es importante. I hope he doesn't call me. Espero que no me llame. I hope he doesn't call me tonight. Espero que no me llame esta noche. I hope he calls me soon because it's important and we need to talk. Espero que me llame pronto porque es importante y necesitamos hablar. I prefer that he calls me later tonight. Later tonight would be más tarde en la noche. Prefiero que me llame más tarde en la noche. What about these next ones? I want you to call me. First, rephrase that in English. I want that you call me. Now translate it. Quiero que me llames. I need you to call me later tonight. Necesito que me llames más tarde en la noche. I prefer that you call me tomorrow. Prefiero que me llames mañana. I like that you call me every day. Me gusta que me llames todos los días. I like that you call me every day to see how I am. Me gusta que me llames todos los días para ver cómo estoy. Let's stick now with the verb llamar, but we'll change the pronoun to le. I want you to call him. Rephrase that. I want that you call him. Now translate it. Quiero que le llames. I want you to call him in the afternoon. Quiero que le llames en la tarde. I don't want you to call him. No quiero que le llames. As we know, the pronoun le means to him or to her. How would you say, I need you to call her for me tonight? Necesito que le llames por mí esta noche. I prefer that you call her before tomorrow. Prefiero que le llames antes de mañana. So here we had examples of the subjunctive tense with pronouns, and we took as our examples me, te, lo, and le. So the important thing to realize is that even though the verbs were in the subjunctive, the position of the pronouns didn't change, meaning that the sentence structure didn't change from what we're already used to. In part 14, I'd like to focus exclusively on the verb estar in the subjunctive. So just as a regular conjugation in the present tense, we would have estoy, estás, está, estamos, and están. Now, as we know in the subjunctive, this verb is going to switch sides. So it becomes on this side, these endings in the subjunctive. Esté, estés, esté, estemos, and estén. If we analyze it, you can see taking the third person here, está, switches over to esté. And we know that he, she, and it and I is the same in the subjunctive, so that's why we have esté for I. Then all the rest simply falls into a straight line all the way down. Esté, estés, esté, estemos, and estén. So all in all, there's really nothing that complicated about the verb estar in the subjunctive. It really behaves itself quite well. We know that the use of estar is connected a lot to emotions, moods, and states of being. For example, what's the word for happy in Spanish? Feliz. Now, if we wanted to say, I want you to be happy, how would you rephrase that using the word that? It becomes, I want that you are happy. Now in Spanish, this would be, quiero que estés feliz. Here you can see clearly that the verb estar is appearing in the subjunctive. Quiero que estés feliz. How would you say, I hope you are happy? Espero que estés feliz. Let's drill this now using all the other angles as well. The word for comfortable in Spanish is cómodo, or if you're a female, cómoda. It can also be plural for we or they, cómodos. How would you translate this? I want her to be comfortable here. Quiero que esté cómoda aquí. I hope he is very comfortable here. Espero que esté muy cómodo aquí. To say uncomfortable in Spanish would be incómodo or incómoda. If it were plural, we or they, incómodos. How would you say, I hope they are not uncomfortable? Espero que no estén incómodos. What's the word for sad in Spanish? Triste. It also has a plural, tristes. How would you translate, I don't want you to be sad? No quiero que estés triste. He hopes we aren't sad. Espera que no estemos tristes. To say I just or I only in Spanish is solo. You can also say solamente, but we'll just use solo for now. The sentence is, I just hope you're happy with him. In the structure, this just is going to be placed way up front at the beginning of the sentence. So how would you translate that? Solo espero que estés feliz con él. Here we have I just or I only hope that. Estés feliz. You are happy in the subjunctive there with estés con él. In one of our first modules on ser versus estar, we used an example word of drunk. I wonder if you can remember what that was. It's borracho or borracha. How would you say, I hope he's not drunk? Espero que no esté borracho. Do you remember the word for jealous? Celoso or celosa. How would you say, I hope you're not jealous? We're talking to a female here. Espero que no estés celosa. What's the word for tired? Cansado or cansada. In the plural, it would be cansados. How would you say, I hope they're not tired? Espero que no estén cansados. What about, I hope we're not tired tonight because I would like to go out. Espero que no estemos cansados esta noche, porque me gustaría salir. Besides moods and emotions, estar is also used when referring to location. How would you say, I want you to be here? Quiero que estés aquí. I need him to be here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Necesito que esté aquí a las 2 de la tarde. Remember that in Spanish they don't say in the afternoon like we would in English. Instead it's at 2 o'clock of the afternoon, de la tarde. I want them to be here with me. Quiero que estén aquí conmigo. They don't want us to be here with them. No quieren que estemos aquí con ellos. He hopes I'm here tonight. Espera que esté aquí esta noche. How would you say that explicitly, meaning he hopes that I am here tonight? So we want to make it very explicit, the he and the I. Él espera que yo esté aquí esta noche. This is an extreme example when it's just assumed that the person had no idea who or what I was referring to. So we were putting in the él for he hopes and the yo for I am here. How would you say, she just wants me to be happy here? Solo quiere que esté feliz aquí. He needs them to be here at 5 o'clock. Necesita que estén aquí a las 5. They want us to be comfortable here. Quieren que estemos cómodos aquí. She needs us to be calm. The word for calm in plural is going to be tranquilos. Necesita que estemos tranquilos. Because this situation is very difficult for her. Porque esta situación es muy difícil para ella. Let's put all that together now. She needs us to be calm because this situation is very difficult for her. Necesita que estemos tranquilos porque esta situación es muy difícil para ella. What's the word for ready in Spanish? Listo or lista. Again, you could also have listos in the plural. How would you say, I hope I'm ready for tonight? Espero que esté listo or lista, if you're a female, para esta noche. I hope you're ready for the exam tomorrow. Here we're talking to a female. Espero que estés lista para el examen mañana. I hope he's ready for me. Espero que esté listo para mí. I want him to be ready for the interview tomorrow. Quiero que esté listo para la entrevista de mañana. I want us to be here and ready to leave before 2 o'clock. The verb to leave here, we're going to use the verb ir reflexively. So we have irnos. How would you translate all of that now? Quiero que estemos aquí y listos para irnos antes de las 2. I need everyone to be ready because we don't have much time. Necesito que todos estén listos porque no tenemos mucho tiempo. To be worried in Spanish is to be preoccupied, and the word is preocupado or preocupada, depending if you're male or female or what you're referring to. To say I'm worried would be estoy preocupado or preocupada. Let's try to use it in a drill, remembering that we're going to switch into the subjunctive. I hope you're not worried about tomorrow. Here we're talking to a female. Espero que no estés preocupada sobre mañana. They hope I'm not worried about the interview. Esperan que no esté preocupado o preocupada por la entrevista. We don't want him to be worried about this. No queremos que esté preocupado por esto. We don't want him to be worried about that. No queremos que esté preocupado por eso. These are general terms about this or about that. So about this, por esto. Por, remember, is the reason why. Por esto or por eso. The only difference is a missing T between the two. Should be here. Between this or that. How would you translate? They don't want me to be worried. No quieren que esté preocupado. Or if you're a female, you will say esté preocupada. She hopes that they are very worried about what we are going to do. Espera que estén muy preocupados sobre lo que vamos a hacer. As you can see, the verb estar is a very important verb and very important in the subjunctive as well. You're going to find it coming up time and again. This is why we need to be comfortable with using it. Welcome to part 15. In the beginning of this course, we started out by looking at cognates. And one of the things that we learned is that you get false positives, words that look like they should be cognates but in fact are not. Now we have 3 famous false positives when it comes to triggers for the subjunctive tense. In other words, they look like they should trigger the subjunctive, but they don't. The first one of these is I think that, which is pienso que. The second, I believe that, creo que. And the third, it seems that, parece que. If we group them all together, we have quiero que, necesito que, espero que, prefiero que, me gusta que. So these are the ones that we have so far. And you can see the 3 below, they really look like they should fit perfectly into that group. Pienso que, creo que, and parece que. But they are false positives. They do not trigger the subjunctive. The verb that follows them will be treated normally. But there is a catch. The catch is if you flip them over and you make them negative, meaning I don't think that, I don't believe that, it doesn't seem that, then they do trigger the subjunctive. So to summarize, on the positive side, pienso que, creo que, parece que, the verb that follows will be normal. These are not triggers for the subjunctive. It's only when they get flipped over onto the negative that they trigger the subjunctive. No pienso que, no creo que, no parece que. One way to help you remember this is a saying, on the positive side, there's no subjunctive. Meaning, if you look on the bright side, or at least on the positive side, there's no subjunctive. So whenever it's in the positive, you can be happy because you don't have to worry about using the subjunctive. It's only on the negative side that you do. Let's run through some examples. We'll begin with pienso que. So, how would you say, I think he's happy? Pienso que está feliz. I don't think he's happy. No pienso que esté feliz. Here you have the no on the negative side triggering the subjunctive. I think they're here. Pienso que están aquí. I don't think they're here. No pienso que estén aquí. Here's creo que. Creo que can be used for I think that or I believe that. I think she's jealous. Creo que está celosa. I don't think she's jealous. No creo que esté celosa. I think we're crazy. Creo que estamos locos. I don't think we're crazy. No creo que estemos locos. And finally, parece que. How would you say, it seems that he's angry with me? The word for angry is enojado. Parece que está enojado conmigo. It doesn't seem that he is angry with me. No parece que esté enojado conmigo. It seems that she's depressed. Parece que está deprimida. It doesn't seem that she's depressed now. No parece que esté deprimida ahora. So far, we have 3 that only trigger the subjunctive when negative. Now the question is, are they the only 3? The answer is no. So just for good measure, I'm going to give you 3 more that fit into this group. They only trigger the subjunctive when negative. So next up we have I'm sure that. In Spanish, it would be estoy seguro de que. Or if you're female, you will say estoy segura de que. Now in the positive, as you see it, it does not trigger the subjunctive. For example, how would you say, I'm sure that he's here today? Estoy seguro or segura de que está aquí hoy. Here you can see that estar has been conjugated normally. It's not in the subjunctive. However, if the sentence read, I'm not sure he's here today, now this would trigger the subjunctive. Try to do it. Try to translate it. No estoy seguro or segura de que esté aquí hoy. Here you can see the trigger in the negative. No estoy seguro de que. Now it forces estar to be in the subjunctive. So we have esté for he is here. Let's try another. I'm sure that they're angry with me. The word for angry when it's plural is enojados. So how would you translate this into Spanish? Estoy seguro o segura de que están enojados conmigo. Here you can see están, so nothing subjunctive here. However, let's flip it over. Now we're saying, I'm not sure that they're angry with me. How would you translate that? No estoy seguro o segura de que estén enojados conmigo. Next up, we have it's true that, which in Spanish is es cierto que. It almost looks like it's certain that, but they use it in the sense of it's true that, es cierto que. Now, in the positive, this does not trigger the subjunctive. So how would you say, it's true that we study every night for 3 hours? Es cierto que estudiamos cada noche por 3 horas. Now, if we turn it around and we say, it's not true that we study every night for 3 hours, this, in the negative, it's not true, does now trigger the subjunctive. So how would you translate that? No es cierto que estudiemos cada noche por 3 horas. Here you can see in the regular conjugation we have estudiamos because the verb is estudiar. However, in the subjunctive, it becomes estudiemos. Try this one. It's true that she only eats fish. The word for fish is pescado. How would you translate it? Es cierto que solo come pescado. So nothing subjunctive here at all. We have come. Now let's flip it over. It's not true that she only eats fish. How would you translate that one? No es cierto que solo coma pescado. Now, with no es cierto, we have triggered the subjunctive. So instead of come, it goes to coma. Finally, we have I know that, which would be sé que. For example, I know that you're happy here. How would you translate it? Sé que estás feliz aquí. I know that he wants to be here. Sé que quiere estar aquí. Flipping it over into the negative, no sé qué, I honestly couldn't think of any good or common examples where I would actually use that. So I'm just going to leave it there. For this one, the most important thing is that whenever you say sé que, it's not going to change anything. You don't need the subjunctive. If for some strange reason you did need to say no sé qué, then you would trigger the subjunctive. So here we have our list of ones that only trigger the subjunctive when they're in the negative. Now, as time passes by, it can be tricky to remember these ones. So just remember the phrase that on the positive side, you don't have to use the subjunctive, meaning that whenever these are positive as you see now, then everything is treated normally. So you don't have to worry about the subjunctive. It's only when you flip them over that they do trigger the subjunctive. In part 16, we're going to finish off module 2 of the subjunctive with some translation examples. So what I'm going to do is demonstrate how the subjunctive fits into the structure that we've already built up so far in the course. Here's the first paragraph that we're going to translate. I know she isn't happy, but I hope she finds the peace that she's been looking for now that she's not in a relationship with him. First of all, we have I know she isn't happy. So this would be sé que no está feliz. Nothing subjunctive here because from before, remember in the previous module, sé que does not trigger the subjunctive. So we have está feliz. Then we have but I hope she finds the peace that she's been looking for. Now here we do have a trigger for the subjunctive. Let's get rid of this first. So we have pero. I hope she finds. This is I hope that she finds. And espero que triggers the subjunctive. So for I hope, we're going to have Espero que. All right, so we've stepped on the trigger. The tripwire has been broken. So the next verb must be in the subjunctive. So the verb to find is encontrar, an AR verb, but this has a peculiar spelling when it gets conjugated because the O kind of splits. So it becomes encontrar is to find, but I find would be encuentro. So we get this sound here in the middle, and this would change to an O, getting rid of the AR. So encuentro is I find. Now what we want is she finds in the subjunctive. So normally it would be encuentra for she finds, but because we're in the subjunctive, it's been triggered, it must change over to the other side. So this is how we get encuentre. So we have espero que encuentre. This now is the subjunctive. The peace would be la paz, that she's been looking for. She has been would be ha estado. This is she has and the been estado. Now looking for, the verb is buscar, so we have buscando. Buscar means to look for, so we don't have to worry about the word for, it's contained within the verb. So la paz que ha estado buscando. Now is ahora, that she's not in a relationship with him. Ahora que no está en una relación con él. So there we have the paragraph translated. Sé que no está feliz, pero espero que encuentre. Here we have our subjunctive because of the trigger. La paz que ha estado buscando ahora que no está en una relación con él. What I'd like you to notice about these translations as I do them quickly is that it's all business as usual. The only time that we have to flip or switch into the subjunctive is when we step on a trigger point. Our second translation is going to be a bit longer. It reads, my neighbor wants to cut down all the trees that separate our properties, but I don't agree with that. Instead, I want him to consider a solution where we can keep the trees because it's very useful to have shade where I park my car in summer. Now, I wonder, just on the surface, can you see the one place in that paragraph where we're going to be forced into using the subjunctive? So pause and try to find where the trigger is in that paragraph. So it's going to be here, I want him to consider. Because what we're saying is, I want that he considers a solution. So let's start. My neighbor wants to cut down all the trees. We have mi vecino. That's assuming it was a male neighbor. Otherwise, mi vecina. Okay, wants to cut down all the trees. So quiere, to cut down is cortar. And then all the trees would be todos los árboles. We need an accent there. Now that separate our properties. Okay, so the verb is separar, and this is going to be right plural because the trees are separating. So we're working with they. So que separan. And our properties would be nuestras propiedades. Like this. But I don't agree with that. Pero no estoy de acuerdo con eso. All right, so far so good, everything normal. Now, instead is going to be en su lugar, in its place. I want him to consider a solution. Here we step on the subjunctive trigger. So, quiero que, I want that he considers. The verb to consider is very close in English, it's considerar. like this. Whoops, should be AR. Okay, so to consider. And just normally, he considers then would be considera, considera. But in the subjunctive, it's going to flip over to the other side, right? So, considere. This would be, en su lugar, quiero que considere. So, in its place or instead, I want that he considers a solution, una solución, where we can keep the trees. So here I would actually use the subjunctive again, even though there isn't any trigger for it. Now this is something that we have not covered in the course yet, but of course we're going to now that we are on the subjunctive. But just for now, take my word for it, that instead of we can being podemos, we're going to switch it into podamos and use the subjunctive. So it would be donde podamos. Keep the trees would be mantener, like to maintain the trees. Los árboles. What we're saying here with donde podamos instead of podemos is like, in its place, I would like that he considers a solution where we might be able to. This is sort of indicating might be able to keep the trees. Now, this is something we haven't, I say again, we haven't covered yet. So if you missed this, that's completely normal. And in fact, I only asked you for one place in this paragraph where we'd use the subjunctive anyway. But this is something that is coming up. I'll explain why this is later. Just to finish off, then we have because it's very useful. Okay, so it would be porque es muy útil. To have shade, right? Tener la sombra. Where I park my car. So we just get rid of this. Donde. Now, the verb to park is estacionar. So let's write it here. Estacionar is to park. So I park would be estaciono. Donde estaciono mi carro en el verano. Like this, so quite long. Mi vecino quiere cortar todos los árboles que separan nuestras propiedades, pero no estoy de acuerdo con eso. En su lugar, quiero que considere una solución donde podamos mantener. Here we have where we might be able. Mantener los árboles porque es muy útil tener la sombra donde estaciono mi carro en el verano. We'll do one final translation now, number 3. It reads, I'm super tired of telling my husband that he should spend more time at home with his kids. It seems that his work is more important than his family. I need him to spend more time with me and show me that this marriage means something important for him. Once again, pause and try to find the place where we trigger the subjunctive. It's going to be here, I need him. Would be, I need that he spends more time with me. So here is where we trigger. So I'm super tired. In Spanish, you can have this word super. They understand it right from supermercado, but they also understand it in this sense as well. So it would be, estoy super cansado, or let's imagine that we're the wife, right? So super cansada. So estoy super cansada of telling my husband. Okay, so of is going to be de. Now we have to be careful here because after a preposition like this, de, Spanish doesn't like to use the ing tense ando, yendo like we do in English. So you're going to, what it does like to do is use the full verb, the infinitive. So telling my husband, there's actually a lot of stuff going on in those three words. First of all, we're not going to use the ing, so we're going to use the full verb because we're following a preposition here. So we have decir, and you might be tempted to say decir a mi esposo. Okay, but we have to remember the redundant le. So it would actually be estoy súper cansada de decirle, to tell to him, to my husband. You see, it doesn't make any sense to have the pronoun there because we're already saying who we're telling it to. But correct Spanish dictates that the le is there and all native speakers will put it there. So, estoy súper cansada de decirle a mi esposa, telling my husband. You see how tricky those three little words were. Then we have that he should spend more time at home. So, que debería is he should. Spend more time, pasar más tiempo with his kids, con sus niños. Okay. So get rid of this. Now, it seems that, remember, this does not trigger the subjunctive because it's in the positive. So, parece que. His work is more important than his family. Let's put our exclamation point here as well. Su trabajo es más importante que su familia. Okay, now here, I need him. It's not, if it was I need to spend more time and there wasn't any him, everything is normal. But I need him implies I need that he spends more time with me. Okay, so this is where we trigger it. So, necesito que. To spend. The verb is pasar. An AR verb. So normally he spends would be pasa, but because it's in the subjunctive, it must switch over and become pase. So necesito que pase más tiempo conmigo. And show me y demostrarme. So to demonstrate to me. And this would actually be without the end here. Demostrarme that this marriage, que este matrimonio, now to mean is like to signify something. So it means would be significa. Significa algo importante para él. So there we have it. Estoy súper cansada de decirle a mi esposo que debería pasar más tiempo con sus niños. Parece que su trabajo es más importante que su familia. Necesito que pase más tiempo conmigo y demostrarme que este matrimonio significa algo importante para él. So once again, everything was business as usual. It's only when we stepped on the trigger that we had to switch over into the subjunctive for that one particular verb. As soon as we did that, everything got reset back to normal.